Our meeting is now open for the sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Janet from Georgia, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for the Plainfield website. I'm grateful for the feature on the carousel called Noteworthy News. This feature provides us with proof of the good that is going on in the world through the kindnesses and selflessness of others. I recently read an article in the September Love is the Liberator magazine that addresses good as being contagious. The article is titled No Contagion in Evil by Gertrude Sutton. In the last paragraph, she states, and I'm paraphrasing here, every time we deny error and declare the truth, we are helping to bring about universal salvation. We help to break the bondage for some brother. We help to prove through understanding spiritual law that good alone can be transmitted from one to another. Recently, a close friend of mine had an experience of doing a good deed. He was on his way home one afternoon when he saw a large metal box in the road. He stopped to move it and was just going to place it on the side of the road, but the thought came to him to open the box. When he did, he saw that the equipment in the box looked very sophisticated, and it had a telephone number on it, so he decided to take it home and call the number. When he called the number, he found out that it was from our local power company. The employee on the phone asked him many questions. Where did you find it? What time did you find it? What does it look like? Etc. And the employee told my friend they were sending someone over right away to retrieve it. But my friend said he and his wife were going out, but they could come tomorrow to pick it up. He barely hung the phone up when he heard the power truck in his driveway. He went out to meet them, gave them the equipment, and as he was walking back to his home, his phone was ringing. When he answered it, it was another power company employee asking him about the equipment he found, also asking many questions. The next day, the power employee who had lost the equipment arrived at my friend's home, and with him he had a substantial gift card for my friend. And my friend said, I really don't want to accept this gift. I just did that because it was the right thing to do. But my friend finally accepted the card with the employee's insistence. And the employee also had a large gift bag that the employee said was from the power company marketing department. The employee said that he and those employees from the marketing department were extremely grateful to him for turning this equipment in. My friend said that when he saw the telephone number, he was grateful because there was no other identification on the toolbox. The power employee told him that his supervisor put telephone numbers on all of his equipment just one day before it fell off of his truck. He also said that he may not have been fired for losing this tool, but he feels like he would be suspended for about a week if he hadn't retrieved it. My friend told the employee that when he opened the box, he felt that it was quite a bit of money, about $2,000 for this equipment. The employee laughed and said, "This tool is a $20,000 satellite capability tool," which explains why everyone was so very grateful to my friend for retrieving it. The employee also told my friend, "If you ever have a power outage, do not hesitate to call me." As my friend was telling me of this incident, I couldn't help thinking how this was evidence again of love reflected in love and how love does meet every single need. I'm very grateful to God for Christian Science, to Mrs. Eddy and her selflessness in bringing the Christ Science to the world, to my practitioner, and for this beautiful Plainfield Christian Science Church, independent. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen from California, go ahead, please.
Good evening. I am so very grateful for Christian Science and its teaching that no matter what circumstances we are facing, our health, our supply, relationships with friends or family, or praying for mankind, God is the answer to meet all our needs. My youngest son, who had been living in Seattle, Washington for the last 8 years, decided it was time to return to Southern California with his new fiancée and find a home in the area where he grew up. I was so happy to hear that he wanted to return to California. They were planning on leaving mid-September. As they were making plans to leave Seattle, they found that using a moving company was going to be more expensive than they thought, so they decided to rent a truck and a trailer for their car and drive themselves. My son has never driven a truck before, let alone with a trailer attached. Nevertheless, they felt that this was their only option. As time was getting closer to the date that they needed to leave, they were having trouble finding a moving company that would guarantee them that they would have a truck on the day they needed it. All the rental companies in their area were telling them that there was so much demand for trucks that as soon as a truck came in, it almost certainly was rented out. They would just have to come in and hopefully there would be a truck and trailer available. As soon as my son told me this, I knew I needed to clear my own thought of fear and worry. First, that my son was going to be driving a truck with a trailer for the first time in his life, and that they wouldn't be able to leave when they needed to. My practitioner had given me a poem, Prayer for Loved Ones by Helen Benson, that helped me so much to let go of any concern or worry that I had about their trip. It reads, I place them in your hands, dear God. I trust them to your care. You who mark the sparrow's fall and number every hair will cherish them and guard them well from snares of every kind. No false responsibility disturbs my peace of mind. Your love, far greater than my own, provides for them all good. This have I learned, to humbly trust your motherhood. After reading this poem many times, I felt so much peace about the whole situation. I knew that if God's plan was to have my son and his fiancée here by a certain date, nothing could stand in the way, no matter what was being said. Also, that God was responsible for them, not me. And any worry and concern was just admitting to myself that I didn't fully trust God to take care of them. They continued packing up and hoping that a truck would become available. 2 days before my son and fiancé were to leave, they received a call from one of the rental companies guaranteeing them that a truck and a trailer would be available on the day they needed it. I was so grateful, but not surprised. I continued to know that God's presence was going to be with them every moment, and divine intelligence was the only driver in every car and truck on the road. It was a 3-day trip, and they arrived in the area just as expected. They are all moved in now and live only 20 minutes away from us. I am so grateful to Mary Baker Eddy and her discovery of the Christ science that reveals the truth about God's perfection and man's indestructible relationship to him, and that this truth can and does meet every human need.
Thank you.
Linda, North Carolina.
Linda from North Carolina. Go ahead, please.
Good evening. I want to express my gratitude for a recent healing. I was getting ready for a family outing, but it had a lot of emotional baggage that went with it. And I was finding myself confused and getting more and more anxious as the time was arriving. I was hesitant to call the practitioner in Plainfield, but I decided to call and ask for support, and it was a really wonderful thing that I did. I got so far in my own work that I didn't want to bring a lot of self into the picture the next day, But beyond that, I didn't have very much confidence, and I was worried that I would fall into old patterns of behavior. I shared my concerns with the practitioner, and she listened attentively. And throughout the discussion, it was becoming clear that mortal mind was attempting to sabotage my thinking by proposing two equally bad scenarios. Either stay quiet and suppress my thoughts and feelings, or risk alienation. But the practitioner encouraged me to speak the truth to the situation if called for, and not to silence my thoughts and feelings in order to make peace when there is no peace. She affirmed that with my motive grounded in love, I would know if and when I was to speak up. This support inspired a great sense of freedom and confidence to trust and listen to God, who gave me grace throughout the day. I felt equal to the moment because I was listening and conversing with the Spirit of God, and that Spirit enveloped everyone. It turned out to be a most fruitful day, which I attribute to the clarity and purpose that was established through the practitioner's metaphysical support. Afterwards, when I reported back, there was even some humor interjected, and we laughed heartily at it all. So tonight, I just want to express my gratitude for this support and the comfort that comes as we examine our fears and problems through the lens of the science of the Christ. There is good reason not to bow down to error or personal sense to make peace, because the voice of truth is much needed and it will be heard. Thank you all for this beautiful service tonight.
Thank you. Jeremy.
I'm very grateful for Christian Science and for this church. I came to Plainfield at the lowest point of my life, and I was certain there was no place for me anywhere and no purpose to my life. The only thing I was certain of was my own understanding led me all the way down, and on my own I could not get back up. Felt when I got here that this was my final opportunity, my last second chance, so to speak. Because of that, I clung to the teachings here and the work like they were life preservers, and they certainly have been that. And I'm grateful now to know that I don't have to cling to this purpose that I've been given, because, as Mrs. Eddy tells us, God made us and our place and our purpose all at once. And that's just a wonderful thing, and it gives me so much peace to know that it's not, no desperation is needed. So I'm just very, very grateful for that. I'm grateful for everything I've learned here. Grateful for practitioner support through the years. And I was thinking today about how it's been 8 years since we moved the recording equipment upstairs, and Bruce and I did that work, and it was quite a job, but during that I learned so much, and just very grateful for everything that this church has brought me. So thank you.
Thank you.
Patricia, Canada.
Patricia from Canada, go ahead, please.
Canadian Thanksgiving is this weekend, and I wanted to express my thanks to God for bringing me to the doors of this wonderful Plainfield church. I count it as one of my greatest gifts that I've ever been given. My gratitude for the dedicated practitioners and members, the music, the website, and the inspired Bible lesson writers. I love this week's Bible lesson where Mary Baker Eddy said, "Parents should teach their children at the earliest possible period the truths of health and holiness." I'll read now from my diary, 1992. My husband and I were both in between jobs at the same time. On the Friday before Thanksgiving, I took all the money out of the bank that we had there, enough for groceries for 2 weeks, and to pay back money that was owed. I was in downtown Toronto, busy with many errands with my 2-year-old son, when I discovered that my purse was missing in the subway with all the money in it. I called my husband, who had only enough to pay for a taxi to get us back home, as I didn't even have bus tickets. I managed to quiet myself and pray to see that principle made man honest, that God's laws of harmony were ever active, of everything being in its right place and of sure supply. "Mommy, you lost your purse?" my little boy asked. "Yes, darling. God will show your mummy where it is." He was so receptive, he instantly reached into the cab, pretending to give me my purse and said, "Here's your purse, Mommy." I realized that if I had that same pure faith as he did, the purse would certainly appear right then and there. Jesus said, "Out of the mouth of babes and sucklings, God hath perfected praise." I was so inspired by my little son's example that I fully expected that purse to surface. I'm sure many Christian Science parents can tell you of times when their children have healed themselves or others. Well, the pressure was on to retrieve it. Guests had been invited for Thanksgiving dinner, including someone I was introducing to Christian Science. But divine love actually extended the invitations. I made a few calls to the Toronto Transit Commission, who had not found it, and they assured me that even if they did find it, because it was the holiday weekend, it would take their lost and found system until the following Tuesday to be able to get it back. I did not accept any of this report. I was convinced that time is not Lord, but eternity. Timeless perfection is truth. The Transit Commission called me early on Saturday morning, so I was able to retrieve the purse with all the money and identification intact, with enough time to purchase groceries, enjoy cooking the meal, with time left over for spiritual study and giving thanks to God. And the job situation corrected too soon after. Thanks be to God. Good evening.
Thank you. Linda, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much for the readings tonight. I want to express my gratitude for all I'm learning here about cultivating the virtue of persistence at Plainfield, especially after having spent so many years of giving up so easily every time I met with resistance. Step by step, with the prayers and instruction of my Plainfield practitioner, I have been able to practice new habits that have been helping me persist in important things, such as putting God first and living biblical principles, which are leading to newfound peace and healing, and learning how to use Christian Science correctly and having it clearly taught. Just a couple of days ago, I was reading in 500 Watching Points, Watching Point 478, which says, quote, "Watch lest you go soft with error and become lenient and pleasant with it, and thereby lose your authority over it," end quote. This made me think of our recent roundtable where we were being taught the importance of uncovering animal magnetism and knowing how it operates in order to be able to handle it. And the watch before this, he talks about that you have to know how you entertain the error in order to be able to face it and heal it. And I just am very grateful for these lessons that we get here at the church, both through our classes and also in the lives of the people that live it and show it and demonstrate it to us. And one of the things I had to learn in persistence was learning to be honest with myself, my feelings, my motives, and with others, in order to be able to know what I had to deal with and face it. And I'm so grateful that I persisted in this with the persistence of my practitioner, because I have been able to have a newfound purpose in living a God-centered life and helping others and seeing healing in my life, which I had not before coming here. I'm very grateful for Christ Jesus and for the sacrifice, Mrs. Eddy, all she did for us so we could have this science of the Christ. And I'm so grateful for this church that has persisted on over the years, over many obstacles, so that we can have it today and carried on for our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce.
In our lesson that we had last week, this is the lesson on unreality. In Science and Health, we had the citations that talked about the two artists. And the first artist was described as the one that thought rightly, because he had high and lofty ideals, and simply said that if other people saw them the way he saw them, they would realize that nothing to be lost, there's all to be gained when they had a correct view of reality. And that's such a pure and good outlook on things and something to hold in mind, obviously. And then it went on to describe the other artist that thought incorrectly. And the first thing out of this other artist's mouth was, "You wrong my experience," which I thought was rather thought-arresting, because it's amazing how quick mortal mind is to get defensive and accusational and even aggressive about it, almost instantaneously. And this wrong artist went on to say that its ideals gave him a lot of personal pleasure, and he's got no notion of ever discarding any of them. And I gotta say, when I read that, it made me so thankful for this church here in Plainfield. When I first came to this Plainfield, we had classes very frequently, and a big part of the instruction was that there's no room for self-justification. And it was something that I had to be reminded of very frequently, because I could think of so many times that in my prior mindset that I was so quick to be self-justifying and didn't want to realize that, this thing, that whatever was coming to light, I could let go of it quickly and easily and be clear of it all. And in time, with a lot of help from a practitioner, this did happen. And I realized that when it did, it was a release of a lot of tension. It was a release of a lot of anxiety and other fear and other things that were actually hindering me. And as a result, I had a clearer view of this reality that, like the first artist was talking about. And it's brought so much more joy and gratitude to my life, and it improved my health immensely. And I'm so endlessly thankful for the instruction in Christian Science here in the Plainfield Church, because it's done an immense amount of good for me.
Thank you. Shorty.
Hello. This evening, I wanted to share my gratitude for the Plainfield Independent Church website. I realized that in order to do that, I had to start at the beginning, which would be God in Christ Jesus, Mary Baker Eddy, our entire church, including the website, where you can find the early workers and listen to many articles as well as read their books. In particular, I have been working with the concept of consciousness, as explained by Martha Wilcox, a student of Mrs. Eddy. In her addresses, on page 145, there is a whole chapter, and just today I turned to her chapter on supply, where she talks about divine ideas in our consciousness that are mental and consist of our supply for eternity. I would like to share something from this chapter. since we already possess the infinitude of divine ideas in our consciousness, we cannot at the same time need or desire anything. When we finally overcome our ignorance of the science of supply, we shall find ourselves in possession of all things. We shall find ourselves secure, abundantly supplied, and satisfied. End quote. A church friend found this quote from Mrs. Eddy in Gilbert Carpenter's 500 Watching Points, 475. Mrs. Eddy said, "Never leave a treatment until consciousness is baptized in love." It's very beautiful. Our consciousness is in God. Thank you, Plainfield Church, where you are encouraged here to study, watch, and pray for ourselves, for our church, and for all mankind. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary.
Thank you for those readings on the importance of persistence. Reminds me of a lesson that I was given many years ago by a Christian Science practitioner in this church. And the lesson was, just the devil loves to discourage you and get you to give up. And the lesson was, if in the autumn you went out in your yard and you raked up all the leaves that had fallen, and then the next day there was a whole bunch of leaves in your yard, would you get discouraged that all the leaves that you raked up the day before were back? No. The new leaves are a fresh, different set of leaves, and you have the ability to rake them up as well. So don't get discouraged. And I first heard this when I was healed of the flu by this practitioner's work. And it was a wonderful healing. I felt like I had really progressed spiritually. And then a few months later, I had the same symptoms, and I called the practitioner and I expressed a little discouragement that I thought I was healed of this, and here it is again. And the practitioner gave me this example of the leaves being raked and said, this is not the same thing that you were healed of. When you were healed, you were left in a different place. And this is something new. God has something new for you to learn. So whenever the next problem comes up, it's never the same. It's always something new, and you are ready to learn the lesson from it. Well, this was so helpful because it cleared any sense of discouragement. It opened my thought to what the practitioner had to give me for me to work with and to study. And I could feel that it opened up my thought, the receptiveness to what God had for me. And with that, I was very quickly healed. And that lesson always stuck with me, no matter what I was faced with after that point, never thinking that, gosh, it's the same thing over and again. No. Every healing we have in Christian Science leaves us better than before and in a different place. So I'm so grateful for what I am learning in Christian Science, for the help of all the practitioners I've had the privilege of working with. and very, very grateful for those readings tonight.
Thank you.
Dale, Virginia.
Dale from Virginia, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for those wonderful readings and all the very wonderful testimonies. I'm very grateful for all that we learn and are able to apply from reading and studying the Holy Bible and Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy. Each time we apply a truth to a situation in our lives and see the power and love of God in action, we feel a little closer to our Heavenly Father and Mother and can know this is true for all mankind. In the lesson this week on Are Sin, Disease, and Death Real? There is the following account in Science and Health. Quote, a little girl who had occasionally listened to my explanations badly wounded her finger. She seemed not to notice it. On being questioned about it, she answered ingenuously, there is no sensation in matter. Bounding off with laughing eyes, she presently added, Mama, my finger is not a bit sore. That's from Science and Health, page 237. Some years ago, after writing a letter to someone who had asked for prayerful help, I went outside to check on my children and found that our little daughter had fallen from a second-story deck, face first, into a tiny rose bush. I picked her up in a dazed condition, acknowledging God's ever-presence and her protection as his child. After laying her down on my bed, I opened Science and Health to this very account I just quoted. In a very short time, I heard her little voice speaking about a picture on the wall. I responded, you have a picture on your wall. Who is in your picture? She jumped up and ran to her bedroom to tell me all about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. In less than 30 minutes, she was completely well, and all the marks had disappeared from her face. When the doorbell rang and I found a group of frightened children coming to inquire about our daughter, I was able to tell them, and they saw for themselves, that she was perfectly fine. I'm grateful for all the Bible stories and the truths they convey, and all the practical examples we find in Mrs. Eddy's writings that we can use in our own lives. And each time we do this, we have wonderful reminders of God's care and love, which we never forget. I'm very grateful for this wonderful service tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Florence, Georgia.
Florence from Georgia, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth, for those readings. I was thinking progress through persistence. But persistence in what? I have learned that the change of thought, the change of base of thought, doesn't come in a few weeks or so. It's a matter of persistence in the truth, our love for God and man. And the truth that is telling us that we are spiritual beings, not a material being. And that our thought must be like the thought of the Christ. And this we can claim every day and persist in it. This week I was reading an article by Samuel Greenwood. It's called The Passing of the Dream. It's a 1907 article. And I was struck by this. It's something that is said in so many different ways. We know that. But I like the way he puts it. He said, when it is understood from Christian Science that human thought and not chance or material law is the author of human experience and produces its own physical conditions, it will be seen how this thought must discern and correct its errors before it can bring out the true sense of being. I love that very much. I love the use of the word author. because it just shows us that what am I persisting in? What model have I put before me looking at every day? That will show what experiences I have. I love Mrs. Eddy's giving us in Pond and Purpose the 3 stages of thought. And at the end, she really does encourage us. It's a beautiful way she ends the whole thing. Quote, "Beloved students, you have entered the path. Press patiently on. God is good, and good is the reward of all who diligently seek God. Your growth will be rapid if you love good supremely and learn and obey the way shower, who going before you has scaled the steep ascent of Christian Science, stands upon the mount of holiness, the dwelling place of our God, and bathes in the baptismal font of eternal love. As you journey and betimes sigh for rest beside the still waters, ponder this lesson of love. Learn its purpose, and in hope and faith, where heart meets heart, reciprocally blessed, drink with me the living waters of the spirit of my life purpose, to impress humanity with the genuine recognition of practical, operative Christian Science. I am so grateful for the instruction to persist. When the headache comes, that headache that has been there, when it comes again, we don't quiver. We don't get discouraged, as a previous testifier said. It is important to always persist with the truth. I see now what I used to do. I was persisting in the error. I believed it and kept persisting in it, and therefore I kept seeing it over and over and over again. I am so grateful for all the instructions that Mrs. Eddy has given us. So grateful for all the early workers, those who wrote these incredible articles that remind us of where we should be in our thinking, and that forever and ever we must always pay attention to what we are persisting in. I'm so grateful for all the testimonies, the hymns, the music, the readings. I'm so grateful to be here tonight.
Mary.
Good evening, everyone. This is from our church website bulletin board, Pennsylvania. This past Wednesday service was nourishing and uplifting. Thank you all. In Illinois, very grateful that this morning, as I was able to identify mortal mind in its false material testimonies as white noise, having no power. As soon as I opened my eyes, mortal mind began to present problems. Initially, I reacted to it, attempting to hurriedly find solutions. Gratefully, I slowed down and began to regain peace. As I quieted myself and began to use this week's lesson, for the lesson from last week, Unreality, October 3rd, as the truth, having all power, the problems that were initially presented were not issues at all. Wow, the nothingness of error exposed. How great thou art. And then a quote from Science and Health. Hold thought steadfastly to the enduring, the good, and the true, and you will bring these into your experience proportionably to their occupancy of your thoughts. So happy for the instructions contained in these 2 articles, Error Appears But to Disappear by Edward Kimball, and Standing with God by Bicknell Young, with much love. And then Australia, Sharing a Universal Truth of Supreme Merit. Quote, God is universal, confined to no spot, defined by no dogma, appropriated by no sect. Not more to one than to all is God demonstrable as divine life, truth, and love. And his people are they that reflect him, that reflect love. End quote. It's from Miscellaneous Writings, Mary Baker Eddy. And then New Jersey. The September Love is the Liberator magazine with the theme, Only Good is Contagious, is fantastic. If all people would read it with understanding, this would bring an end to the pandemic. Thank God for this church, this magazine, and everyone who contributes to it. And then this is a testimony from Virginia. Recently, my world dramatically changed as my husband was taken to the hospital with a heart attack. He is not a scientist, but greatly respects Mrs. Eddy's work and has seen and felt its healing power. I texted and then called my Plainfield practitioner, and she said that she would pray with me, and that she would also pray for my husband as long as she had his permission to do so. The first of the 3 procedures was completed, and I was able to be with him, and he was gladly gave his consent for the practitioner help and for a healing. He was still having a big problem with much pain, and they went into the next procedure with the same result. I went from being very confident and feeling God's love and the practitioner's work to be feeling very frightened and preparing myself for bad news. I did go back and forth a good deal, but I was mostly feeling confident because of all the inspirational instructions we all received from this church. The doctors couldn't figure out what could still be wrong, and we were all doing our best to see him as God's perfect child and in God's perfect care. After several days of waiting and seeing on the doctor's part, and close to continual prayer on our part, the doctors decided to try one more time and hope that he survived while they did their best with yet another procedure. The progress seemed very dim and grim as well, but thank God it was a success. The practitioner's diligent work and God's grace, my husband was brought home one week later, feeling good and with no pain. The practitioner shared with me that she knew that my husband's life was in God, in spirit, and that it couldn't be taken from him, and that also it was not his time to go. He still had a lot of good work and good deeds to accomplish. Thank you to this wonderful Christian Science church and our practitioners. This trial has truly been a proof of God's care. And this is, I think, a fairly new name from Missouri. New to us, anyway. Please convey my earnest appreciation to your membership for providing the Bible lesson, testimonials, and other resources. Your broadcast to the world makes a huge difference. I was recovering from a lengthy stay in the hospital when I searched for the lesson. I'd never been a patient in a hospital before, and returning home to convalesce was scary and lonely. Finding our pastors, the Bible and Science and Health, speaking to me on your website calmed, comforted, and strengthened me. Today I am totally well. I even just recently returned from a scuba diving trip, a passion of mine. I'm continuing to listen, love, and benefit from the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent and your grace and giving of the Christ. Many, many thanks. Yours in truth and with much love. I too am so grateful for those readings on persistence. What an important quality. I remember as a child, my dad had this quote. It was a quote from Calvin Coolidge on his desk, and it is this: "Nothing in this world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent." I remember even as a child thinking about that and thinking, well, yeah, I mean, you could have talent and education and genius, but how many people actually have that all? But the one thing everybody can have is persistence. That is a quality of God, and it's given to all of us. So it doesn't matter about all these other things. Persistence is what is important. And as was explained in many of the other testimonies tonight, what is persistence? And it's sticking to the task at hand. And what motivates that persistence? It has to be love, because if it isn't love, you'll get tired and just give up. But if it's love for God, love for mankind, you will persist. And I was thinking, in terms of this, about those of us still left in our church who went through the times of trial here. We're not any special people, but why are we still here and others are not? Persistence. It's just that simple. We didn't give up. And we also had a great love for Mrs. Eddy and the science and for what this church had to offer. So even though there were many trials, many temptations to give up, to turn around, to go back, we didn't. We persisted. So in many ways, what Calvin Coolidge says, it's omnipotent. It is omnipotent, and by that, it is from God Almighty. He gives it to all his people, and those who persist win the crown. Mrs. Eddy says, truth persists, error does not. So we can all persist with the truth, a quality of God, to get us where we need to be. I'm so grateful for all the lessons I learned in this church. Grateful for all of you dear ones, this wonderful meeting, music, testimonies, readings. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you.